Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, here's the editor of independent news site, commentator and journalist, Selwyn Manning. And she is from the Auckland University Department of Film, TV and Media Studies, blogger and commentator, Phoebe Fletcher. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1. Is dumping Section 9 of the State-Owned Enterprise Act to National what the seabed and foreshore land confiscation was to Labour? And how does breaking news that National are about to gut the Ministry of Māori Development bode for Waitangi Day? Issue 2. Sale of Crayfor Farms, racism or economic self-sabotage? Issue 3, the mega upload arrests. Forget Crayfor Farms, virtual Uncle Sam is here and he's handing out cyber spankings. And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with issue 1. Out of the blue, National jumped the Māori Party with a request to do away with Section 9 of the State-Owned Enterprises Act so that their sale of assets can get up and running. This hard-fought-for clause is viewed as the high point of Māori legal victories, and the suggestion to dump it has seen National in damage control. Phoebe, is this just National Party incompetence? Or is it a sign that the economic right of the party have won the internal debate and are pushing ahead with state assets no matter the impact on the relationship with the Māori Party?
I think there's certainly ideological aspects to it, and we had John Key arguing in 2008 that he would like to see the Māori seats abolished by 2014 once all the treaty claims were settled. But in terms of this particular issue, I would have to say that it was incompetence.
Really?
I could not believe that a lawyer had actually looked through that and not noticed that as a major mistake. I mean, as Jeffrey Palmer was saying on Radio New Zealand the other day, there have been so many cases that have talked about Section 9 since, you know, the 1987 Māori Land Courts case. One of my students was telling me just before I got here that they did a rudimentary search on one of the legal databases and came up with at least 50 cases that had said it as a precedent.
And
so
yet
it is
Key
something
said,
major.
And yet Key said in the press conference that it had never been legally used or had never been legally challenged or had never, a legal case had never been based on it. He's clearly wrong. He hasn't been briefed,
I think he is. From what Jeffrey Palmer was saying the other day as well, who he is a lawyer, he was saying that there's a clear example in a case for Tainui of it being used. So I think that this is incompetence, and that's why they've gone back through and changed the drafts that they've published on their website too.
Selwyn, the relationship with the Māori Party has helped provide Key with political camouflage. It makes National look a hell of a lot more moderate. Is that tactic still credible in a harder right second term?
Well, it all depends on how far the National Party actually wants to push the Māori Party into a corner here. I think that there is a certain amount of engineering, political engineering around this whole issue. Irrespective of whether or not this issue developed because of incompetence is one thing, but it developed and it was continued on. So look at that part, there has to be a certain amount of element of will behind the outcome here. So the National Party, in my view, strategically was testing the Māori Party.
Right.
It is sitting there and it's thinking, you know, how much does the Māori Party need us? We're the all-powerful National Party. We've got all this populist support. We're the ones sitting in the beehive really here. We and our members and our stakeholder groups do not like this section in this. We do not want to scare the seagulls when these state assets get flicked out, for example, for sale in the share market. Really, you know, where's the Māori Party going to go? Is it going to be satisfied appealing away into the opposition benches? You put yourself into the National Party's shoes, the strategists' shoes on this, and all of those questions come up and they're probably answering them all themselves. But the Māori Party is sitting there and it's thinking, no way, as Peter Sharples said yesterday, you know, that this is in a treaty week. This is the Treaty of Waitangi Week. This is an insult, and this is a deal breaker, irrespective of what the Prime Minister John Key says. So it's backfired on National.
Can I just interject there and say that I think that they are working on the legislation around state-owned enterprises at the moment, and I think to a certain extent, Selwyn, that you're absolutely right. They have identified Section 9 as something that will potentially scare off foreign owners. So this is something that they are absolutely engineering, but I do think in this particular instance that there is some incompetency there too.
You're very kind to them.
If they do succeed and bully the Māori Party out of the government, they're only left with a 1-seat majority. Can you rely on John Banks not to be crazy?
I think John Banks will take National's line. It's still a majority of 1, so it's enough to ram legislation through.
But let's look at it. You know, you mentioned before, is this some sort of way of ideologically aligning the right here? And I think you're right in the sense that the right has taken control of the National Party. It is not the Conservative body that we saw campaigning in 2008. The legislation it's going to be putting through is far more aligned to the ACT Party than the Māori Party. Those inside the National Party will be demanding its strategists start to think, what ways can we render the Māori Party in the centrist position as our poodle here?
That's
but
right.
you know, this week has shown it's not going to work.
Phoebe, beyond the state-owned enterprise clause, if the massive hollowing out of the Ministry of Māori Development goes ahead, how would the Māori Party justify dismantling TPK? I mean, they've been major critics of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tariana Turio was saying in December last year that she felt that it didn't have enough focus on getting Māori into employment, although I'm not certain. I mean, there hasn't been enough detail coming out on the way that it's going to be restructured. I would think that there is perhaps behind the scenes deals going on there where there is quite a lot of pressure on whānau ora. We did hear last year that that was going to be a fiscally neutral initiative, and while the Māori Party thought that it applied specifically to Māori, that this was something that English was saying would apply to all lower income families. So I think that there's quite a lot of political pressure.
TPK staff were not told at all until 3 p.m. this week that the staffing cuts were looming. They were completely kept in the dark about it.
Yeah, I wonder what the implications are for things like broadcasting. I mean, as I say, I would like to see more of the detail coming out on that.
I think you're right on whānau ora. You know, the issue here is really, can the government continue to afford what it committed to in the last term? And so it's looking at positioning ways that its very populist policy there can be sustained, and it's looking at, you know, all of us just look at the momentum here and what has been established. All of the public services getting significant cuts through it.
That's right.
Getting rid of TPK altogether is what is at, you know, the question marks around that, and what is the consequence of that further down the track? It's alienation and alienating the Māori aspirations and you know, the whole work that ministry does. So
Selwyn,
really
is the
quite a scary
posturing over the state-owned enterprise clause by the Māori Party to blunt the criticism that they've dismantled the ministry?
I think they're caught clearly, immediately by surprise over this whole thing. I think that with the Māori Party being so close, and giving it every appearance that it was in close with the National Party on this,
right.
you know, post-election, right on the night, you know, the Māori Party was pretty much laying down and saying, whatever the National Party deals to us, we'll take that, you know, because we've got big gains coming to us. But the surprises around here that I guess TPK or Te Puna Kōkiri has not been protected by that political positioning. And maybe all of this that we're seeing this week, where the Māori Party is suddenly thinking, we've been done over here. We're feeling estranged, and we ought not to be. We're supposed to be around the table here. We're getting squeezed out. We can see what is happening on the grander picture, and we're not going to have a part of it. National Party needs the Māori Party in there for its votes. You know that. Phoebe knows that. We all know that out there, people watching. What National does from here is really damage control. If it doesn't do damage control, well, then it's got a real problem.
Question to both of you: if the Māori Party swallow these dead rats, is that the end of the Māori Party politically?
Oh, I mean, that's a tough question, because one thing that we have seen this election is the Māori Party benefit much more than, say, Mana. That, you know, perhaps older conservative Māori are much more influential in the way that the vote sways, which was something that was suspected. I think what we might see again is another political reinvention, and I would say that is going to revolve around these Treaty of Waitangi obligations as to how...
I think
how many more dead rats?
Māori Party cannot swallow any. I mean, we've got to stop thinking election year strategies here. This is long-term branding into 3 years out here. Māori Party is indicating it wants to not only be connected to iwi Māori and the conservative elements within the Māori electorates, it wants to be representative of the ethos that is behind the foundation documents like, the Waitangi, Treaty of Waitangi and others. We want to be the custodians of that.
That's right.
That's what it's positioning for here. If the National Party actually tries to force it off its political ground that it's establishing itself on now in this term, well then it's got problems. What the problems would be, yes, it will get legislation through the House, but it will be very, very far right and probably too far right for it to maintain its populist position itself in the electorates.
Right. Thank you, panel. Moving on to issue 2. Criticism aimed at the sale of Crayford Farms in China was written off by Maurice Williamson last week as racism. Phoebe, is it racist to be concerned about a state that arrests bloggers, artists and Christians for celebrating Easter having more power over our productive farmland? Is that racist?
I mean, that question is quite a loaded one. I think the Crayford Farms thing, I mean, I'm going to say the same thing that I said last year, was that I think that there is an element of racism here. I don't entirely agree with the National Party rationale. I do think these are issues that need to be discussed, but I think that, even looking through the Herald comments, it's pretty blatant as to why this has been such a sort of major issue. And this taps into kind of deeper culturally held beliefs that we've had in New Zealand, that we have been aware of that kind of racism for quite some time.
I don't know,
Phoebe, I think that it is an issue about land sales, but that this particular one has spurned
Well, of course it always will in this country. There's a redneck backlash to everything that's not sitting in their court. But the fact of the matter is that the Crayford Farm type of issue is a big issue because it's a strategic asset. There is a strategy in here. It's nothing to do with being xenophobic or racist.
No, that's not what I'm arguing, Selwyn.
But that's what the issue is.
I know that is the issue, but I'm saying that
it's national interest.
I'm saying that in the popular culture, okay, if you
It's
look through the Herald comments and stuff like that, it's actually pretty hard to. No, he was asking me the question of why do I think it's caused such a stir. Do I think it's an issue worth debating? Absolutely. I mean, I think there's something really quite ironic here in the fact that, say, Frontiera is doing expansion across Latin America, and I believe it was Chile, where they've just had, this similar sort of criticisms levelled at them on the dairy industry.
Globalisation, right?
And I think it's an issue that certainly needs to be discussed.
Selwyn, is key pacifying China after the vast concessions he's given America in the free trade deal? I mean, how much of this is manoeuvring between the superpowers?
Well, let's peel that back a bit. John Key is not in a powerful position over this. It went to the courts. It was relating to an outcome of what legislation, what laws currently exist in New Zealand, that the courts were going to determine that it would go in the Chinese favour here. That then falls back into the lap where the National Party, National Party's lap where it's saying, well, that's okay with us. The law, the courts have ruled in this particular way. But the pressure last year, when this issue raised, was an issue of national interest. It was a strategic asset, the Crayford Farms. It was one where an outside country, irrespective of where it is in the globe, could come in and drive a wedge strategy in that would undermine New Zealand's monopolistic kind of export function through Frontiera and others. And that was what the danger was all about. It wasn't that it was about China. It wasn't about whether or not New Zealand or Frontiera has invested in Chile or other kind of similar kind of production and countries.
It
was all about strategy, and this is where the concerns lay. And there is a fault in the Labour Party's drafting of the free trade agreement that assisted the courts to say
that's right. Absolutely,
the Chinese can go.
I think we're kind of actually on the same page. I mean, I'm sort of more so talking about transnationalisation of dairy, which is why I brought up that Frontiera example. I mean, this is something that's going on globally at the moment, and that's why I believe we need to think strategically about it. So I don't think that we're too much in disagreement there.
But I just think the racism thing is a red herring.
I do think it is a red herring in terms of them writing it off just as that, but I think that the level of popular attention, I mean, Selwyn, you and I have been on here last year and talked about so many issues that didn't really get very much popular attention.
But this goes off like a bomb. While the percentage of Chinese ownership is tiny compared to Anglo-Saxon countries that never seem to attract this attention, let's be fairly clear, the fact remains that 70% of the wine industry is owned overseas, as is 72% of our pine forests. Dairy's the last bastion, isn't it, of our economic sovereignty? We shouldn't be allowing any sale of that, should we?
Well, I think this is a question that needs to be seriously debated. I know that the Greens put forward a bill last year to block anyone from foreign ownership of over 5 hectares, and nothing really has happened about that. And as you say, Labor haven't really had the stops there to protect us, and particularly with that free trade agreement.
Well,
I think this is, this is a significant issue. Agriculture is something that we're very dependent upon in terms of our economy.
But beyond that, overseas investment we saw today in the newspapers relating to, film director
James
Cameron coming over and purchasing 1,000 hectares around the South Wairarapa area. Now that's significant kind of area. I thought Russell Norman, the co-leader of the Greens, raised an issue that was quite interesting on that. One of his points of rationale that is saying that this kind of sale of significant New Zealand land blocks should not go ahead was because of the global demand for countries which can produce food and have a ready resource to water. In the future, that such countries, the land blocks that they hold, are going to become very valuable on the world stage. That this type of purchase drives up the prices beyond a New Zealand. And in some ways, you start thinking, is this type of manoeuvre much different than the old style 20th century style of occupying and then possessing a land? This is an economic means of possessing land, potentially. We're not saying these individuals are, but potentially, and I think that's where the debate needs to be.
That's exactly what my point was earlier, that there is this transnationalisation going on in dairying and agriculture. You've only got to look at Africa, at the land grabs that are going on at the moment. This is a kind of a new form of economic imperialism.
So National sat on this until after the election because they knew it would impact its eventual 1-seat majority if it had come out before the election. How do opposition parties avoid claims of xenophobia when dealing with this issue?
By sticking to the nuts and bolts of the issue, of rendering every other racist argument irrelevant. That even New Zealand First that gets sucked into that tube time and time again, resist that and speak on its nationalistic platform. We're not saying nationalistic from the point of view of New Zealanders only. It's a point of view, I think, of making sure that New Zealanders in the future are in a position where they can actually live in a country that has not been exploited to the point by outside interests, to the point where New Zealanders actually are in a dire situation.
Question to both of you, how does America respond to this decision? Are they going to step up the twisting in terms of the free trade agreement? We won't see any concessions from them?
Well, I think that they're going to be very interested also in our land, and I think that this is something that absolutely needs to happen, is that the Overseas Investment Office, there must be a look at the legislation around that and a discussion about that very shortly.
The South Pacific, obviously, has become the new Cold War front between China and America. How do they respond to this?
Well, in behind what they've done in Australia, Australia's trade interests obviously very, very closely aligned with China, and its national product is as well. How America responded to that was putting pressure on to have more military personnel on strategic basis up in Darwin, for example, knowing that the Chinese have got similar kind of arrangements up in Papua New Guinea. So, can we expect pressure in that
Ship
way?
Visits?
Well, maybe it is on the horizon. You raised that last year, and I thought, no, that's a long way away. But maybe, these kind of things can move fast. But the one thing we do know, and I think that's underlying your question there, is the United States is the other superpower on the block here now. New Zealand is in this unfortunate situation where we're the spam in between two bits of bread.
Yes, exactly. And both those pieces of bread are very hungry.
Yeah, they are, very much.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. As Brian Rudman pointed out in the Herald this week, the Crayfer farm pales in terms of sovereignty by the mega upload arrests. Phoebe, is Brian right? Is this America attempting to impose its jurisdiction into cyberspace? And does our acquiescence suggest we are in America's sphere of influence?
Well, absolutely, and I mean, this has been one of the key debates about the internet, is that everyone's in America's sphere of influence. I mean, this has been something that's come up in international meetings again and again, debates over American hegemony over things like ICANN, for example. And yes, I mean, we do have extradition treaties with America, but I think that there are sort of some serious issues around this. I mean, we could look, for example, at Jennifer Granich's blog that she did for Stanford Law's Centre for Information and Society, where she said that the legal case was not so clear-cut, that this was actually a precedent that we're seeing being set here. And, you know, on a number of factors. The first was that the legislation really applies to civil law. In order to prove criminal law, you have to prove much more intent. And we've also got cases going through with Roger Director at the moment about, you know, what is the second party liability over copyright. And certainly there were examples of films that they had been distributing, but they have only really been trialled on Taken. So I think, you know, there are a huge kind of issues around this. I mean, Needy Crows as well, who's the European Union's Commissioner for Information and Society, she's been, you know, tweeting against SOPA lately. So this issue is not so clear-cut. And for me, I think the whole kind of moral panic focus on his lifestyle of kin.com has really drawn attention away from the key issues, and that is who controls and legislates the internet, and the sort of battle that is going on in the United States between Silicon Valley and Hollywood at the moment.
Do you have any real questions or doubts in your mind that this isn't a showcase? Is it a show trial or show trial?
Well, if you look at the legal arguments, we can see that clearly this is a precedent that is going through at the moment.
So none of what Kim.com has been charged with appears on our extradition list with the US. Why are we putting corporate Hollywood's profits margin on par with drug dealers and war criminals? How did that happen?
Because its security and policing arm is basically you know, the wing that it's using to enforce that, and it's an all-powerful thing. The other thing is the seduction element here. When the FBI goes knocking on the doors of the New Zealand police establishment, it's going to open the door and give them a good solid handshake. You know, we know
it was remarkable, wasn't it?
But this
74 police officers and a SWAT team.
Yeah, we've got grunts on the ground for you, FBI, and we're going to use them for you. Thank you very much for asking. You know, but the cause and effect here is what interests me. I think, you know, we touched on it on the last program I was on with Phoebe here. But you know, I think that, you know, when you look at these types of things, it's not just reining in, you know, an alleged crime that is going on. There are signals that are going out there. The cause, in my view, is that file sharing sites have been used for leaking secret US documents.
Right. And Mega Uploads was used a lot.
Mega Upload was a significant player amongst them. Most recently, the hacking of Stratfor.com, which has, you know, its members, it's like a private intelligence company. Its members and its client base was hacked and put out there for everyone to see. Mega Upload was the most significant amongst those that was helping to share that information around. And I think that's the cause. We see only weeks later. You know, it was only in December when the Stratfor hack went on.
That's right.
We see then this lot pounce on Mega Upload here in New Zealand, and I think the effect was, the desired effect by their point of view would be to send a signal to every file sharing thing. Get your house in order or you're going to face the same thing as what Mr.com is.
Is Rudman correct that this is actually a bigger threat to our sovereignty than Crayford Farms?
Oh, how do you measure that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Crayford Farms is a wedge strategy type of thing if our suspicions are correct. So that's got long-term effects, you know, that would undermine New Zealand's position, its national interest. With this issue of Mega Upload, what that does is just demonstrate to all of us, all of that wedge strategy happened a long time ago, that whenever the FBI or other outside you know, organisations or agencies like that want to pounce on New Zealand, we are very compliant and we will. You know, just remember that one individual here was from the Middle East region, was here learning how to fly some years ago when Labour was in power. He was found to have links via communication links to those that developed the flying skills to fly aircraft into the World Trade Center. He didn't even go through process here. He was outskied before anybody could catch up with the issue by David Cunliffe as Minister of Immigration. New Zealand is very compliant to maintain its five eyes
Question to both of you. What are the ramifications of allowing rendition for copyright? Because that's pretty much what we're facing here, aren't we?
Well, they're huge, but I think, you know, you have to look at cyberspace as not being something that is specifically neutral. I mean, you only have to look at, you know, the new weapons that America has launched, for example, the internet in a suitcase, which is where you go into an authoritarian regime and just drop off a suitcase with wireless, or, you know, their use of sock puppets. The internet is seen as a crucial mechanism for information, and I believe, you know, Hillary Clinton, it was like a year and a half ago where she came out and she said that the US is now in an information war, and we would like to see a return
Phoebe
to the
is so right
1950s and
you know,
60s in terms of communications.
What we've picked up in the last 6 months is the cyber warfare is now absolute. You know, Anonymous and the other splinter groups, it's a guerrilla warfare tapestry out there, and they are going for it, and they've been taking big, you know, the establishment all over the globe has been taking big hits. This is the most fascinating period from a digital warfare point of view. Some would argue that it's preferable to having people dying in the fields, but then others would say, well, it's just as bad. So where it goes, I mean, this is probably one of the defining issues from a security intelligence point of view, for example, for this year at least.
Thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with final words. Selwyn, your final word this week?
Okay, there's a lot going on in the wider Pacific region. You know, we've got mutinies, for example, occurring up in Papua New Guinea. We've got major floods and major political turmoil going on inside Fiji. You know, we've got other areas in that region that are kind of showing signs of destabilisation or progressing, you know, on a positive thing. Where is our Minister of Foreign Affairs? Well, where is he?
It's nice that he's not around, actually.
Is he on holiday? I mean, surely, you know, the amount of engagement that New Zealand has had, not as much as the Australians, but it's still significant with Papua New Guinea, both at political level, governance level, and in security level. And it doesn't even have a word to say publicly about a mutiny that took place last week, settled by now, but was all keyed into a stoush between two people that actually believe they are the actual legitimate Prime Minister at the moment. And we don't actually have a word in the public from our Minister of Foreign Affairs. I just think it's appalling. Come on, Murray McCulloch, you know, he's got to come out from his holiday and actually work.
But perhaps he's just waiting to know what to say when Washington contacts him. Here's what you have, Mr. McCulloch.
My greatest fear is he's very satisfied, and the Key-led government is very satisfied for New Zealand to be an insignificant player behind the Australians in the Pacific. That's just not good enough for this Pacific Island state.
Phoebe, your final word.
Well, it has to be Catherine Isaac, doesn't it, in the charter schools? You know, former ACT Party president being appointed there. I mean, I can see what's happening strategically, but, you know, clearly this is something that's going to aggravate relations with the PPTA, and I do believe at the end of the day, even though they have an ideological, strategic motivation behind this, that they need to take care of the children's teaching first, and the last thing they need to do is another big fight like Antolli was engaged in.
Thank you, Selwyn. Thank you, Phoebe. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, the most interesting idea in all of this treaty clause debate could be the accidental fusion of different protest voices of state asset sales. If the treaty suddenly becomes seen as the sovereignty handbrake to asset privatisation, Key will have managed to merge Māori nationalism and those espousing economic nationalism. Treaty rights could make a cross-cultural jump as Pākehā's anger at asset sales identify with self-determining sovereignty. National are effectively throwing out one of the hardest won legislation victories for Māori, which can now act as a rallying point for all New Zealanders demanding no privatisation. Way to rally your detractors. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand